Welcome, Cristina Moreira from Portugal. I'm very delighted to have you here on my channel because I met you in a very special occasion, and you are very familiar with Isis, with the goddess of the female side, but you know also a lot about megalithic cultures, about ancient cultures, about special places here on this planet Earth. So I'm very happy to meet you here in this talk and ask you things that really, really make me curious. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Catherine. It's really a great pleasure to be here and having this conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you also. Would you like to introduce yourself just very briefly, like what you studied and how it came that you got on this path studying ancient cultures and very, very old stones and architectures?
Sure. Well, since I was a very young child, I was very interested and curious about ancient sacred sites. I mean, I would see documentaries on TV about the pyramids at Giza or Machu Picchu in Peru or Chaco Canyon in the United States. And I would just be stuck to the screen from a very, very young age, fascinated with those sites. So the call was already there. And I actually wanted to be an archaeologist. But then I had a different range of interests. I was also in love with biology and ecology and music. So when I first went to college, I actually went to College of Engineering in Lisbon, where I was born. I was going to become an environmental engineer. Then I had a crazy accident, and that made me stay, a bike accident that made me stay at home for a while. And I realized I was not doing the right thing. And then I thought, well, I really love traveling. So I decided, and I love history. So I decided I would take a degree in tourism, and then I did a post-graduation in cultural heritage because I wanted to travel the world and visit all these ancient sacred sites that were calling me from a very young age. So eventually I did that. And even when I was in college in my around my 20s, we could pick up on different subjects, and the ones I would pick up on would be on the mainly on the megalithic culture in Portugal by the time. So when I finished college after 5 years, I applied for a scholarship to Goa in India, which I was granted. So I went straight from college to Goa to do research on Goan cultural heritage. And I was absolutely fascinated with India and Goa. I was a very skeptical person at the time. I was 26, so I went by myself to India. And
Why were
because
you skeptical? Sorry to interrupt. Was it something about the place or just as a personality? What do you mean?
personality, because I had
Okay.
a very strong scientific background. I studied a lot of chemistry and maths and physics and chemics, and as chemistry I spent many hours in lab doing experiences, so the alchemy was already present for me. So I had a very scientific background. I was also coming from the College of Engineering, so I was very, very skeptical. But then in India things were feeling so different. My spirit was just, I was in a constant state of bliss, like, what's going on? And then something really magical happened. I went on a boat trip with some friends that I met there. We were like five, and we were on a fisherman's boat, and we were going to see the dolphins. And then eventually we saw some dolphins, so we stopped the boat and we were just in silence. And it was a huge group of dolphins, maybe 20 dolphins. They came to us, they surrounded the boat, and they start swimming in circle around us and going like in synchronization. And something happened in that moment. I started to feel like my energy, my spirit opening from like the root chakra to the crown, which at the time I didn't even know what the chakras were. This was back in 2000 and I was very young. So the dolphins did some work on me, and I wasn't the only one on the boat that felt it. I was ecstatic and I was just opening up. And that's when I had my spiritual awakening, and it was a very, very powerful experience. And my life changed after that. All my perspective of life changed. So I became a very devoted researcher of the mysteries since then. And then when I eventually, after 4 months, I came back to Portugal, and it was very difficult for me to adapt. And I would just say, oh, but there's something. The energy of India is so different. There must be something. And by the time I used to read the newspapers every day, and so I was reading the newspapers, and there was an article saying that that's launched a satellite that would measure the different gravity fields in different locations on Earth. And they had exactly the comparison between India and Portugal.
So you
So,
were like a gravity satellite as well, a little bit.
well, what was saying is that the force of gravity in India, and in particular in South India, is 10 less percent. So when we are in India, in particular in South India, and particularly in Sri Lanka, our bodies are lighter. So the spirit rises, we become less dense because of the force of gravity is the one that is the least dense on the planet. So in comparison to South India, where I was, and here in Portugal, here things, all matter is 10% more dense than in the south of India. So this was the scientific explanation that would allow me to explain to my scientific minded based friends what I was feeling, because no one would understand me at the time. So I had to go back to India and then
Hmm.
stayed there for 10 years. And I met the father of my child. I
Let me
eventually,
just interrupt you just for a second, because this is an interesting part that you just mentioned about the gravity fields, and you went from Portugal there back, but also on the other way. So is that something that you now consider as just a scientific fact, or is it something that you say that it's just a metaphysical fact, or is it also in your life? Is that mixed? How do you deal with that?
it's mixed. It's mixed. I really love connect because I had such a scientific education, and then I opened up to spirituality and esotericism. I like to connect both hemispheres of the brain. So what I was trying to explain by words, that just in India I was feeling lighter, so full of light. My spirit was lighter, everything was lighter. And then there I had a scientific explanation saying that actually the force of gravity is lighter there, so people eventually feel lighter. So yes, both perspectives, esoterism, which is the wisdom coming from within, intuition that is connected to the right hemisphere of the brain, and then exoterism, which is the science coming from without, which is connected to the right brain, and it's the logical, rational mind. So when we connect both hemispheres of the brain,
Isn't
it's
that the left? I'm not sure. The scientific is at left. I wasn't.
the
I,
scientific. The scientific is the left brain
yeah. Okay.
side, and the intuition one is the right one that controls the left side. Yes.
hmm Yeah. Okay. So please continue. Then you went to India back again for 10 years, and there you became a mother. Is that something
Yes.
that now,
Well,
since we
yeah. I came back to Portugal a couple of times. I would come to spend the summer and then go back there. So, in 2004, I had this dream that I had to go to Brazil and then become a mother. So I went to Brazil. I was there for 3 months. I did the initiation with the Mother of Saints in Bahia, Salvador da Bahia, because I had this dream that I was floating on a magic carpet there in Bahia. And then there was this rune from the Nordic tradition, which is the rune Othala. And I had this dream before going, and what is this? I've never been to Brazil. I've never been to Bahia. So I went to do research, and the dream I had was exactly the old streets in Bahia, Salvador da Bahia. And I felt I had to be initiated there. And the rune that showed up in my dream, I went to research, and it was the rune of the mother. It's like a cross like this. And it was so interesting because when I landed in Bahia, they gave me a little crochet that you put here because it was for supporting women with breast cancer. And it was that exact rune. Exactly when I arrived there, I was given. And so it was an incredible set of synchronicities. So then I came back to Portugal. My ex-husband was there at the time. I got pregnant. And then eventually I went to India because I wanted to have a water birth. And at the time in 2004, there were no midwives doing water births in Portugal. So I chose to go to Goa, and my daughter was born there with a holistic midwife practitioner from Germany. She had a holistic birthing center in Goa. And yes, and then again, my life changed. So I became a
So,
mother, and I eventually ended up being a single mom, and I raised my daughter on my own. And we stayed in India for some time. We also lived in Portugal. We also lived in Costa Rica for 2 years, in California for some months. So my daughter traveled the world with me, and yeah, and I gave her the most like mm, wide range of experience that I could offer to her. And
so
2000.
yeah, yeah. Sorry to, I'm sometimes I'm interrupting you because I think it's interesting to kind of stop and have a look at what you just said. Sorry for that. Because you said you needed to go to India for a water birth. Here in Germany, I think they had water births in hospitals. And I wonder why or how that was for you. Why was that so important? Was that your special connection to the water because you told us about the dolphins, or was it a very natural way to give birth? What was the fascination or the voice that called you to say, "Oh, I really want to give birth in this way"?
Yes. Well, I just knew it. I could not imagine myself giving birth in any other way. I mean, I could go to Spain at the time or Europe, but I had that call to India, and and then I found out about this holistic birthing center, and it just made all the sense. So I was 6 months pregnant, and I went to India specifically to give birth there, and it was a very incredible experience because I was at home when the contractions started. I had rented a house there in Goa, and and I called the midwife, but she was helping another lady giving birth, so she was not
Mm.
available. So yes, I stayed with the father of my daughter. We were alone the whole night, and I thought, okay, I'm going to give birth here. It will be just the two of us. And then, but then eventually, last minute, her assistant arrived. She was also from Germany, and she took us to the birthing center. But she was an apprentice, and she didn't know how to do things. And by that time, I was in very strong pain. And then my midwife arrived. She had not slept the whole night. She had helped an Italian lady deliver. And she started to fill up the hot bath and put the special oils. And the moment I went into the water, my full body relaxed. And I swear I had no more pain. And after 20 minutes, my daughter was born. And it was a very incredible experience because she had told me, trust the contractions, don't make strength, don't push out, just trust your body knows, and your baby knows what you're doing. So I was really in no pain. I relaxed so much in the water. And then I had the contraction, and her head popped out, and her head was inside the water for a couple of minutes. But I knew she was breathing through the umbilical cord. So I just relaxed. And then another wave came, and her full body came out. And then she was born out of the water. So I really felt the synergy of my body and my daughter's body. There was this greater consciousness, mother and child consciousness linked together and working for the birth to happen. So she's my only daughter. This was my only experience of birth, but my advice for any potential mothers that might be giving birth soon or at some point in their lives, to really relax into trusting the process. And then the warm water also eases the body into deep relaxation. But it's very important to not go too early into the water. So that also helped me, because sometimes women go too early into the hot tub and the body relaxes so much that the contractions stop, and then they have to come out of the water to give birth. So this was a very interesting experience, learning experience for me. I actually have a video of that moment that I've shared with many friends that became pregnant, to bring this into their minds, because it was such a peaceful birth that I'm so grateful for that experience. Yes.
So this is kind of a very great example that birth is not meant to be also always a painful procedure. Maybe it's meant completely the opposite. What do you think?
Well, yes, ideally, I believe that it should be. Of course, sometimes there are other situations that we cannot avoid, but if everything is like, if the mother is okay and the child is okay, just doing this exercise of just going into the water in the last, like, when the baby's just really about to come out, and work with the baby, just connect and feel into the body. I mean, that was what made sense to me. It was my intuition that led me into having it done that way. Yes, I don't understand sometimes when we see some movies first of women giving birth lying on their back. That is anti-gravity. That should not work like that. That was actually the demand of King Louis for the 14th of France, that used to enjoy watching his lovers giving birth on the bed, so he made them be lying down so he could sit on a chair and watch. That's so terrible. So women should be working with the force of gravity, so standing up or crouching down, or just in the bathtub, like I was half seated. I was not like just like this, I was like this. And then feeling into the body and trusting the contractions like a wave. So they would come like a wave. And then when it was the right moment, then just push when the wave was coming, but not in the intervals between the contractions, because that would be not working with nature. That would be against nature. So taking use of the energy, of the natural energy of the body, my body and my baby, we delivered. So yes, I don't understand sometimes when we see those movies like push, 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 and wait for, and I, no, wait for the contraction, wait for the contraction.
Yeah.
Well, but this was my experience, of course. This was my experience. But yes, I wish for all women giving birth that they can have the best experiences, and for all souls coming into human form to have the best experience in coming into this world. May it be the most peaceful and natural as possible. I really pray for that.
And you also said that you kind of had the experience to do it all alone. Um, when you were in that, why do you feel that you did a giving birth by yourself? Was it no?
No, the moment of birth, the midwife arrived. She was there with me for the
Okay.
last 20 minutes.
Good. Okay, good.
Before that, I was with the father of my child, but we were very young and inexperienced. So my midwife was there for the last 20 minutes. She filled up the tub for me, and yeah, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
maybe.
Sorry that I understood that wrong before in the talk we had before. Yes. So
Mhm.
yeah, thank you very much for sharing. This is a very personal experience and a very personal vision that you share here with us.
Mhm.
Yeah, and now you went to all those places that are connected with Isis. On your side, we can see the Isis statue also, which yeah, very powerful figure. Could you tell us what, for your perception, is maybe one of the most important secrets or mysteries of Isis?
Well, Isis, she is the great mother in ancient Egyptian culture. And the land of Egypt holds many mysteries. The original name of that civilization, that ancient civilization, was actually Kem or Kemet. And then when ancient Greeks arrived there, they kind of changed the names. But Kem is actually the root word for chemistry and alchemy, because it was the land of alchemy. The wisdom keepers, the priests and the priestesses at the temples of ancient Egypt, they had very, very, very high knowledge. And even today, we can still see in some of the temples all that wisdom depicted in the walls, in all the reliefs and the hieroglyphs, but also in the sacred geometry of the places, of the pyramids, of the temples, and the alignments with specific constellations and specific directions regarding the solstices or the equinoxes. So in ancient Egypt, Isis, she was the great mother, but her Kemetic name, so her name in ancient Egypt was Auset. So Isis was Auset. Isis was the Greek name that the ancient Greeks gave to the Great Mother. So we have the great Egyptian Trinity. Isis Auset is the Great Mother. Osiris, which ancient name was Osar, is the Great Father. And then we have the sacred child, Horus, which the Kemetic name is Heru. So the real names are Auset, Ozar, and Heru. This is the ancient Egyptian trinity. And Auset, I'll call her with her proper name, she is the Great Mother. And she is many times depicted breastfeeding her child, Heru. So the myth of Auset and Ozar, they were really, really like in love, and it goes a bit odd for our minds today, but this is all like allegories. So they were husband and wife, but they were also brother and sister. And then Osiris or Ozar, he was the god of fertility. He was the green god. So every year the floods of the Nile happen, and they happen around end of July, beginning of August, and they happen when the star Sirius rises in the sky, when it becomes visible. So the star Sirius is associated with Isis, Auset, and the constellation of Orion is associated with Osiris, Ozar. So Osiris or Ozar and Auset, they were married and they were very much in love, and she was the great mother, she was a healer, and she would work with her magic would be a magic of healing that she would offer to all her children. And then Ozar or Osiris, he had a brother, Seth. And Seth was the god of the desert. And eventually he became jealous of his brother Ozar because all the people loved Osiris, because he was the god of fertility. So he killed his brother. Seth killed his brother, and he chopped his body in 14 parts and he spread them all over ancient Egypt, Upper Egypt and down and Low Egypt. And then Isis Auset, she went on this quest to recover the pieces of the body of her beloved, and she recovered all the pieces except, and this is the mythology, except for the phallus. She could not find the phallus of Osiris, because it had been swallowed by a fish. So she put with her magical healing powers and all her love, she put the pieces, the 14 pieces of her husband back together, and she with some piece of mud, she shaped the phallus and she made love with him, and she got pregnant, and she gave birth to their child Horus or Heru. Then Osiris, he ascends to the sky, and his their child Horus or Heru, which is the falcon god, he goes to Seth and he revenges his father. And in that battle, his left eye is taken off. And then eventually, through another intervention of a higher being that is actually taught, he gives him another eye. So the Horus quests, or Heru, like his ancient Egyptian name, is actually the hero's quest. And there are many words that come from ancient Egypt that we still use today in different languages, whether are Latin languages or Germanic languages, and that come from there. And we don't know, and we think, oh, comes from ancient Greece or other places. But yes, in my research about ancient Egypt, I've been finding so many words that we relate to some words we use today. So the hero's journey is the quest for recovering his left eye, which is the eye of intuition. So we have in the ancient Egypt, sometimes we see two eyes depicted: the eye of Ra, which is the masculine, the rational, the logic, and it's related to the sun, and the left eye of Horus, which is the one that connects with our intuition. So again, this theme of connecting both hemispheres of the brain, the right and the left. Yes, so we see many times, I'm looking to the side because I have a statue of Horus Heru there, so in my altar. So Isis Ozet is many times depicted breastfeeding her child Horus Heru. And that depiction of the mother breastfeeding the child also permeated into other cultures and other religions. So for instance, in the territory where I live, in Portugal, the indigenous people from this territory, I mean, before the arrival of the Romans, the Romans arrived here around 2,000 years ago, and they found the local indigenous people, which were called the Lusitans, which actually means the people from the land of light, Luxitanos. And yes, and they found, and we still have a legacy from those times today, that the cult of Isis Ozet was being practiced in this territory.
Interesting.
Yes, yes. I was recently in the north of Portugal, in the city of Braga, which is one of the oldest cities of Europe. And it was also a Lusitan city from thousands of years ago. And I was at the Cathedral of Braga, which is from the 11th century, 12th century, sorry. And so it's a big stone cathedral, very, very old. And on one of the sides of the cathedral, there's a stone that was used to build the cathedral, but it was from an ancient temple of Isis here in this territory. And there's an inscription on that stone, and it was dedicated by a priestess to Isis. So it was coming from the temple of Isis in the Iberian Peninsula territory. And that street on the side of the cathedral, it's called the Street of Our Lady of the Milk. And there is a statue there of the mother breastfeeding her child. And it's where the inscription to Isis was. And it's very devoted. There's a great devotion in that place to Our Lady of the Milk. And there are many statues of very, very ancient statues of Our Lady breastfeeding her child, like the ones we find in Egypt all through the temples of the great mother Isis breastfeeding her child Horus, Heru.
So the Christian belief also took that picture over for like Mary and Jesus as a child. So this is something iconographic that is going through so many traditions and also places, as you recall it. If we go back now to where we started, who was Isis and what kind of message does she have for us? I think we should also take a moment to look back what kind of culture it was. And you were telling me already about Atlantis and about the megalithic sites that we have in Europe and all over the world. We might not have the right information about it, or we should really learn where they're actually from. And this is something that is not on any kind of tourism signs, that it's not in not any kind of tourism guide or book or anything. So that would be very interesting if you could tell us about the connection about the Isis or Auset cult and what we now remember or might not remember about Atlantis.
Yes, definitely. That's a very important topic because we are living very rare times on Earth for every human soul incarnated in this time, in this Earth. We are going through a great changing of the eras. And we're not just going from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. It's a great cycle of close to 26,000 years that is completing. And conventional history puts the story of human civilization in the time frame of the last 6,000 years. That's what we all learn at school, that human civilization started in ancient Mesopotamia, which is the area of Turkey, Armenia, Syria, Iraq, around 6,000 years ago. And before that, humans would be just very primitive hunter-gatherers. But then we find this megalithic culture legacy of all these monuments around the world that holds so much higher knowledge that even science today cannot explain. And Egypt plays a key role in the uncovering of those mysteries. So it's really time to rewrite history, because at this great turning of the ages, and this is a convergence from different cultures around the world, from India, from Europe, from South America, that we are at the great turning of the ages. So we are at the end of the Kali Yuga. That's how the Vedic culture calls the ages. They are the yugas. And we are at the end of the Kali Yuga, which is the age of darkness, which has been prevalent for the last around 5,500 years, which corresponds to the basis of this civilization, going back in time to ancient Sumer. And we are in the process of ascending into a new age, which is an age of enlightenment. And this is also why there's so many people going through this process of spiritual awakening, because we're heading to the age of gold. And the megalithic culture from ancient times, and most specifically what we find in Egypt, the culture of the pyramids, they have so much wisdom encoded. And so it's really a legacy from another culture. And it's like the veil is being lifted so we can remember who we are. Because as much as we step forward into the future, our consciousness is expanding, but it's not just expanding forwards, it's also expanding backwards into the roots of the truth of who we are as a species. And by going back to those most ancient roots, we find a common ground to all human beings walking on this earth, and that we are brothers and sisters. So this is also a quest for peace when we go to these ancient sacred sites. And speaking about Atlantis and the connection to Egypt, but also not just with Egypt, there are many tales that there was this very advanced ancient civilization. They call it Atlantis, but other names could be given because it's not just in the Atlantic area. Also in other continents of the world, we find this culture. We find it in China, in South America, and in many places. So around 12,000 years ago, there was a big cataclysm that happened on Earth. Some say it was the impact of a comet. Some say it was a solar plasma event, which triggered a massive climatic change. So around 12,000 years ago, we were slowly coming out of a long ice age. The temperature was becoming easier for humans to thrive. We still had megafauna. Megafauna was still present, and
What is that? Megafauna? What is that?
megafauna. Okay, so megafauna are the huge mammals, like the mastodonts.
Oh,
The
yeah. Okay.
okay, um,
Also, were the human beings much taller or much smaller? What do you think in the Atlantis times?
well, there are vestiges that have been found of very tall human-like skeletons with elongated heads. This is a fact. And there's something curious about that because they've been found in Malta, for instance. They've been found in Peru. But when they traced the DNA back in time, it all points to an origination point in the Middle East. Even the ones in Peru, they can trace the DNA analysis back to the Middle East, the fertile crescent in the Middle East. So we don't really know, but we have these mysterious remains of.
Just a minute. Maybe they were not human. Maybe they were just aliens from other planets. We don't know.
Don't know. We
No.
can
Okay.
ask questions. I
Mhm.
love going for the anomalies because when we go for the anomalies, the things that science cannot explain, then we make the right questions. And when we make the right questions, then the answers start to come. And they come not just from outside, they also come from within because there's a memory that is encoded in our DNA that is being woken up. And this is part of the process of ascension that humanity is going through. So going back to the storyline, we were slowly coming out of the ice age. There are stories that arrived to this day from Plato. Plato was a philosopher from ancient Greece, and he received information from his uncle. They say it was his uncle, could be, could not be. Solon. Solon was even older than Plato. And Solon went to Egypt and he met with the wisdom keepers in the ancient Egyptian temples. So they held records in the temples of this very ancient civilization that was destroyed by a big cataclysm around 12,000 years ago, which corresponds, through geological analysis, to a truth that something happened, that we're coming slowly out of the ice age. Suddenly everything froze again very fast. That's also why today we still find, as the ice melts, we find full bodies of big mammals still with herbs. They were just eating and they froze just like that. And then for around 1,200 years, the weather at the surface of the Earth was very, very unstable. It could have been a comet impact that created this nuclear winter that everything froze again, or most probably from the latest research, it was a solar plasma event that our sun, the star in our solar system, is made of plasma. And there was this huge, huge, huge solar plasma burst that somehow affected the Earth and completely changed the climate. So first everything throws, then to 1,000, but there's also vestiges of fire. So it's very crazy. And when people analyze the ice cores from Antarctica, they find all these layers. So there was massive freezing and then massive fire also, all happening at the same time. And it's curious that especially in Turkey, we find these underground cities that maybe humanity, the survivors from this big cataclysm, had to go underground for a while because at the surface of Earth, it was not possible to be. So after 1,200 years, everything was destroyed. There were massive earthquakes and there was a pole shift. Many species were extinct. And then there were some survivors from this ancient civilization, which is the civilization of the pyramids, which would be Atlantis, but maybe with other names in different parts of the world. And 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 they are the remains of the golden age of humanity, when humanity was capable of living in full connection with their with the elements of nature, with the relationship between earth and sky and the cosmos. And they had very, very high knowledge of sacred geometry, knowledge of music, of mathematics, of physics. For instance, I believe, and not just myself, that the pyramids in the Giza Plateau in Egypt are a legacy from those times. And and of course, conventional history says that it's not true, and no, that's not true. But then, for instance, we look at the Sphinx. The Sphinx has in her body marks of erosion that have been proved to be from very intensive rains. So in the 1990s, Dr. Robert Schocht, which is a very, very famous geologist, he was called to Egypt by Anthony West, that was doing research there, and he asked him his opinion, and he looked at the marks of the Sphinx and he said this was caused by massive raining, and the last time it rained like this here was 12,000 to 13,000 years ago. And after that, it became a desert. So this proves that the Sphinx and the Giza Plateau are at least 13,000 years old. And
Just a minute. And does the science accept that too? That this is a proof? I mean, you said it's proof because you really got into a lot of layers, not only science but also yeah, about the spiritual side of it. Is that something that science accept, or is there a long way to fight? What do you think?
science is not accepting this as, I mean, academia is very, very attached to the old story. So, but the geology of the erosion marks in the Sphinx, they could not be caused by wind, like they say, because erosion by wind, it's like horizontal. It makes like these horizontal tunnels. And it's only the pouring of massive quantities of rainwater that causes the vertical erosions that we can find in the Sphinx. And then if we go further, the Sphinx and the three pyramids of Giza, they are all connected with sacred geometry, with specific angles, and they all share proportions. So we can understand that the mind that created the pyramids and the Sphinx at the Giza plateau was thinking of the whole place as a whole, and not that one pyramid was built by a pharaoh and then from his son and from his grandson.
Mm.
Well, that's what uh, an analysis, an impartial analysis reveals, that those monuments must be so much older. Also, 4,500 years ago, like they said, it's the age of the Great Pyramids. If there were hunter-gatherers, they would just be working with stones and little chisels. How could they build those monuments? So it's just, we just need to lift the veil and the truth stands before our eyes. The Great Pyramid of Giza works like, it's like, it's so much knowledge and wisdom that is encoded there. So it's like a legacy for our times. So there are different measures that were used in the pyramids. The meter was used, the feet was used, the royal Egyptian cubit was used. All this, so meter was already being used at that time.
So just
And
an interruption again, sorry. For me, it's always interesting to know what they really wanted to tell us, because you said it's information for us, and you said it's now we're in a turning age period. We're in an ascension. A lot of people think it's a descension. A lot of people experience it as a big time of crisis. So it would be very valuable, you, as you have really gotten into the stuff, that you could give us, if you like, some kind of hint what we can profit or not profit is in a financial way, of course, but what we really need to know about the knowledge to help us now.
yes, definitely. Well, time has a quality, and time works in cycles. Time is not linear, and even quantum science is arriving to that conclusion that time is not linear. And we are all souls having a human experience for the sake of bringing spirit into matter. So when we are trapped in the third dimension and we just live in that realm, and we don't question, and we just accept all the information that is thrown at us, that's our reality, and it's valid for any step of development of a human soul, which is the process of consciousness expanding. So, but we are a species that have free will. I believe the free will is actually linked also to a certain degree to the will of the soul. It's well, we could go very deep into the spirituality and understanding the nature of reality, but these times are times of the lifting of the veil. So, for instance, we go to the Great Pyramid of Giza. There is so much encoded there. That would be like with what a legacy from an ancient, very advanced civilization would leave, like a time capsule for another civilization to arrive to that wisdom and rebuild a human civilization. So, for instance, the Great Pyramid, the measures of the Great Pyramid have a lot of codes. The proportion between the height and the base, and the slopes of the angles, they all reveal sacred science. They reveal sacred proportions, sacred geometry. They reveal the distance between Earth and Moon, the distance between Earth and Sun, the diameter of the Sun, the diameter of the Moon. even the latitudes where the Giza Plateau stands, uh, it's the north latitude are exactly the same numbers of the speed of light, exactly the same numbers. Hmm?
Interesting. Yeah.
And it stands on this parallel, the 33rd parallel on Earth, which many ancient sacred monuments all around the world stand on that parallel around the Earth. Um, but also the Great Pyramid and the Giza Plateau, they work like a gigantic clock, like they're marking time, because there is this very, very important time cycle that we should be aware of, because it's what's playing for all of us. So the Earth has this movement of rotation, but it also has the movement of translation around the sun. And then it has another movement, which is the axis of the Earth has like a declination of 23.5 degrees. And so the axis of our Earth takes approximately 26,000 years to complete this cycle. So now our polar star, where the north pole, the north direction of the Earth, is pointing to Polaris, which is a star in the constellation of the Ursa Minor. But 13,000 years ago, the axis of the Earth was pointing to another direction in the sky. And by that time, our polar star was Vega, which is a star in the constellation of Lyra. And then we had other polar stars. There was also Tubal, which is in the constellation of Aquarius, and there's also Deneb, which is in the constellation of Cygnus. So approximately every 6,000 years, which is like a quarter of this big cycle, the axis of the Earth is pointing to a different polar star. And this is a great marker for the turning of the ages. So, where does this number come from? Approximately 26,000 years. It's 12 eras. So we're coming from the era of Pisces, entering the era of Aquarius. Each era is approximately 2,160 years. And the marker for that is the constellation to which the sun is aligned in the March equinox. So now, at the March equinox, when the sun rises, the constellation in the background is the constellation of Aquarius. In the last 2,160 years, it was the constellation of Pisces. And now we're transitioning to the constellation of Aquarius. So each era, 2,160 years, multiplied by 12, we reach the number of 25,920 years, which is the great precessional cycle. And I know this is a lot of information, but all this is encoded in the pyramids, and it's so important that we become consciousness of this great cycle. So it's 12 eras. So it's not just shifting from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. It's like the big year, 12 eras that complete, and a new cycle of 26,000 years that is opening up for us. And we are seeding the metrics for the new generations, for the new civilizations, like we are the seed people. And why does this happen? It's because of that movement of the axis of the Earth. And well, I'm an astrologer, and I studied with the shamanic astrology, and that is now called the Turning of the Ages Mystery School, founded by Daniel Giamario. And in the 90s, he was already aware of this cycle, and he asked to a very famous French astronomer, whose name was Jean Mousse, to calculate when the December solstice was aligned with the center of our galaxy, because it's what's happening now that makes these times so rare. That the
When
winter.
is it, Christina? Sorry, because there's what people saying, oh, 2012. everything's going to be over or something really big is shifting. Other people now talk about 2023, which is the turning point. Can you recall the year, or is it for you just a period of time where everything changes?
It's a period of time. So
Okay.
according to astronomical calculations, every 72 years, the axis of the Earth turns 1 degree. So the most precise alignment is within 1 degree in 72 years. So between 1962 and 2034, there is 1 degree of precise alignment of the December solstice with the center of our galaxy. And that's what marks the beginning and the end of a 25,920-year cycle. Because only about 26,000 years from now, we will have again the December solstice aligned with the center of our galaxy. So the middle point was actually 1998. So we are way past the middle point of this precise alignment. This is an astronomical alignment that is taking place. But then we have all the different cultures around the world, the ancient indigenous cultures, saying that this is the end and the beginning of a new time. So we had the Mayan calendar ending in 2012, which is within this period between 1962 and 2034. We have the end of the Kali Yuga from the Vedic culture in India. The end of the Kali Yuga is in 2025. So 2025 is the end of the Kali Yuga, the end of the Age of Darkness.
Mm.
We have also in South American culture, uh, they call it the age of the fifth sun. That's also, we are also changing from the fifth sun to the age of a new sun. So it's all around the world. There's this convergence, but it's not just 1 year in particular. It's within this interval that
Mm.
the December solstice is aligned with the center of our galaxy, that all this shift is taking place. And then we also have this marker of the changing from the Pisces era to the Aquarius era. And then on a more solar system, because this is galactic, right? This is a galactic alignment. It's a huge alignment. But now coming to our solar system and into astrology, 25, is also a year of a big shift. We had 2020 with all the conjunction of planets happening in Capricorn, involving Pluto and Saturn and Jupiter and other planets that move faster. They all got together and the world changed for all of us. For every single soul on this earth, the world changed because Pluto is about death and rebirth. And it was amplified by Jupiter, and Saturn was also involved, which is the planet of structure and form. And it's like the rules of society, how our societies are organized, and
Well,
what is sustainable in the
mhm.
long term, and what's not sustainable. So 2020 was a marker for a big shift, a big change. And now 2025, all the outer planets, so the planets that move really slow, they're going to shift into new signs. So Saturn and Neptune are shifting from Neptune to Aries. Uranus is shifting from Taurus to Gemini. And Pluto is shifting from Capricorn to Aquarius this month of November. Pluto is the first one to shift. Yeah, it already been there, but then moved retrograde, and now it's entering Aquarius for good. So 2025 is coming with a big shift for the collective consciousness. And some of the planets are involved in this movement between Pisces and Aries, and then retrograde to Pisces and going to Aries again, which is the Alpha Omega point. It's the beginning and the end. And I believe that the portal in 25, this big portal of consciousness, will be open for those that really want to recognize their own divinity and their own, I mean, there's spiritual work to be done, of course. We have to, we in the work of processing fears and blockages from many generations, from memories that are encoded in our DNAs, from past lives, from our lineages. And that's why things have become so intense, because we are processing a lot so that we can clear the field to become higher beings. We are going into direction, into the age of light, into the Satya Yuga, into the golden age. So going to these ancient sites in Egypt, for instance, not just in Egypt, but I'm focusing more in Egypt because we're talking about the Great Mother Isis Auset and the myth of Ozar and Heru. And we find so much coding in the pyramids that science cannot explain today how they were built. Originally, just the Great Pyramids would have been around 3 million blocks of granite, each weighing between 10 to 70 tons. And they came from South Egypt. They were not even close in the area. And they're all shaped perfectly as parallelepipeds. So no one knows how they were built. It's been dilapidated with the passage of time, but it's still standing, even surviving earthquakes and floods and whatever. It's still standing. And we can still, those codes are still there engraved on the stones for us to be able to read today. But then there are other mysteries in Egypt. It's not just the pyramids. We have places like the Serapeum, which is also close to Cairo, which is a set of tunnels, underground tunnels. And in these tunnels, there are 24 sarcophagus, these huge, huge boxes of granodiorite, which is a very, very hard stone. It's like a black granite, but it's even harder. And they're huge. No one knows what they were for. They're larger than the entrance into those tunnels, so they don't know how they manifested inside. Um,
Is this
and
tunnel out of stone or earth? I mean, could they have digged a hole in the earth, or is it also surrounded by stone?
these tunnels are carved into the bedrock. It's a
Oh,
limestone bedrock underground, under the desert, the sands of the desert. And there's a system of tunnels with many, they're very long. And they have these 24 boxes, huge granite boxes. I mean, you can put like 20 people inside each one of those granite boxes. And they say they were used for mummified bulls, but doesn't make any sense.
what do you
Uh,
think they were for?
I believe they were used for storage of important artifacts. And they were found almost all open. Only one was closed. But then there was someone who used dynamite a couple of centuries ago to open it, and we don't know what was inside. So what I believe, and many people that do research on ancient history and alternative history and trying to find, like, who are we? I mean, where do we come from? What divine capabilities do we have as a species? Well, when the Egyptian people arrived there, they already found this legacy there. So this was not like the Serapeum, the pyramids, the Sphinx,
Mm.
and a few other places like the Osirian in Abydos. They were not built by the ancient Egyptians. They were built by this ancient antediluvian civilization, the legacy of Atlantis. And yeah, and in Peru, we also find this type of megalithic construction. And in China, there are also pyramids all around the world. But Egypt, because there, we have the desert, the sands of the desert, they covered so much that things were be able to be preserved. And there is so much to be like
discovered.
uncovered. Yeah, with
Hmm.
lighter
Hmm.
technology, they know there is so much. So yeah, it will be for many generations maybe to uncover that. So
But is it very, sorry, please, is it the purpose to really uncover, or do you think it's also a good way for humanity to just leave things like that because they have a meaning, maybe they have a power? What is your approach to all those ancient sites? Because some of them are also destroyed when they are discovered. What do you
it's,
think?
so maybe they're being guarded by divine protection, so that if there are still hidden artifacts that are hidden there with no one knows,
Mm.
maybe they only when the right time is there we can discover,
Mm.
because there are so many questions and we're searching for the answers, but it's really time to go beyond the old paradigm that human civilization only started around 6,000 years ago, because otherwise there's no explanation. Science today cannot explain how the pyramids were built or how these granite boxes in the Serapeum were built. And then there's also something very interesting. For instance, here in Portugal, we have a very large legacy of megalithic culture. We have standing stones, we have stone circles, we have dolmens. And actually, the standing stones, and some are like 6, 7 meters high, they resemble the Egyptian obelisks. And the dolmens, the passage mounds, they would be covered like a mound. They resemble the pyramids. So, what was the purpose of these places? And they all face particular directions, like the solstices or the equinoxes or certain stars or constellations. So I believe that even the megalithic culture is a legacy from these ancient times, from the survivors of this great cataclysm that happened, this great flood that even the Bible speaks about, this great flood that happened. Many cultures speak about this great flood that happened, this big cataclysmic event that happened. And then the waters rose and Atlantis sunk, but it was not just Atlantis because it was all around the world. And then there were survivors, there were sages that survived, and they went to the different corners of the earth, and they were able to pass the wisdom that survived to wisdom keepers. And Egypt is a very, very important place for that, because of all that we still find in the temples. Like in the temple of Edfu, which is the temple of Horus, Heru, well, it's written on the walls of the temple, all this the story of this ancient civilization, and then the survivors that came, which were called the followers of Horus, or the shining ones, because they would shine. They had this natural glow into them, and they took this wisdom there from a past golden age of humanity, and that's where we're heading again. So the veils are being lifted. And it's very curious because there's this researcher. He's a polymath, a very interesting person. His name is Robert Edward Grant, and he studies a lot about sacred geometry. And in I think it was 2018 or 19, he was inside the king's chamber in Egypt, inside the Great Pyramid, and he's been there like around 17 times, from what he shared. And it's been a common fact that there are no inscriptions or hieroglyphs inside the pyramids of Giza. But then he was looking at the sarcophagi, the granite box inside the king's chamber, and he found this inscription saying Alpha Omega that no one had ever seen before. I mean, the Great Pyramid must be one of the buildings in the world that had received more visits over thousands and thousands of years, and there were no records. No one had ever seen that the Alpha and the Omega were engraved, etched on the granite box in the king's chamber, which they say it served for burial. It was for burial, but no one ever found any signs of that. Then his wife was looking at the walls inside the king's chamber, and she started to see the figure of a bull. And then he happened to show this to a friend of his who was an astrologer, and they started to identify all the constellations of the zodiac on the walls of the king's chamber. And no one had ever seen this before. I mean, he called the archaeology department of Egypt. They were like, no one had ever seen that the constellations of the zodiac were there before. And then he used this software to connect the dots because the walls are very washed. I mean, they've been cleaning and cleaning the walls. So he asked them, don't do that because you're eroding. So yeah, all the constellations of the zodiac are there. And only now that we are at the great turning of the ages, they become visible for the collective consciousness. They were not visible before. So it's why? Because we are coming back to a golden age. And this holds this knowledge of the passage of time and the nature of time, that as we go through this passage of the eras, there are like different light codes that allow us to have different spiritual experiences. So we're coming out of an age of density and war and conquer, and we're going towards an age of enlightenment. And this has to do with the spiritual quality of time. And this is also a very important legacy from all ancient megalithic cultures around the world, for us to have this notion that time is cyclical and that we are souls having a human experience, and different cycles of time have different qualities. And now the veil is being lifted, and we see the markers in the walls of the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid of all the constellations of the zodiac that the sun goes through in its annual cycle. But we also see a reference to the four pole stars. So this cycle of precession of the equinoxes is also encoded there. And when we enter the king's chamber, we enter between the constellation of Pisces and Aries, which is the Alpha Omega point, the beginning and the end, which is what is engraved in the sarcophagi. And then they found, Robert Edward Grant also found, that in other sarcophagi, granite boxes all throughout Egypt, he was able to identify 80 sarcophagus boxes that had the Alpha and the Omega. So the Alpha and the Omega are a legacy from this ancient civilization. They're not from the Greeks. The Greeks found them when they got there, but it must be much older. And
Okay, Christina, sorry to interrupt. Because we have a limited time, my Zoom will just disconnect at a certain point. I'm so sorry, but it's very interesting. Maybe we can make a second course the next time, because I mean, I can really see that you can make courses forever. Maybe how about we kind of make a turn and end this talk with coming back to Isis and coming back to the female power. So if people say, "Oh, this is so interesting," and I don't know what was Atlantis, what kind of abilities had the people back then? What is the meaning of the female power? Could you elaborate a little bit on this? Where could people go to nourish that curiosity?
I believe the great feminine power, the divine sacred feminine power, is the one of giving birth. We all come into this world through the womb of a woman. So women are like portal. They're the portal through which souls arrive into this earth. Also the capacity to breastfeed the child, that caring nature. So connecting with nature, with Mother Nature, Gaia, our planet, our sacred planet, is conscious. The intelligence of nature is outstanding. It's the intelligence of creation. So there's this divinity of the sacred feminine that is impregnated by the sacred masculine, and the sacred masculine should protect the earth as the body of the goddess, but also women. So the sacred masculine is the guardian, the divine guardian of the sacred feminine. and through the sacred feminine, we will come into creation. Now, regarding Atlantis, they would say that as their civilization also started to decline, that they started to misuse their technologies. Because if there is balance between our spiritual development and our technology, it's just perfection. It's like the alpha and the omega, the feminine and the masculine, the rational and the intuitive, they're all connected and there's balance. But when technology starts to develop at a speeder rate than the spiritual development, then there is imbalance. So that's why doing our own inner work and spiritual development, it's so important, because science is evolving, but it must go on the same pace as our spiritual development. And the Great Mother Isis, she's there to remember. But all of us, we have all of us, women and men, we are an expression of the divine feminine and the divine masculine, without and within. So we need to remember that we are here having a sacred experience as human beings, but we are multidimensional and we are much more than that. And reclaiming our divine birthright, our divine essence, that we are all children of the God and the Goddess. So connecting to nature, connecting to these ancient sacred sites, and in particular in Egypt, where we can still see so many depictions in the ancient temples. And that's also why I feel it's so important to take people there. And that's what I do. I have this expedition to Egypt coming in February, where I'll be taking an international group, and we're going to be visiting these places. We're going to be working also with the astrology of each participant, so people get to know their archetypes and they reconnect with their divine essence through their birth charts. We're also going to learn about the cosmology of the turning of the ages and the special alignments that reveal that we are at a great turning of the ages. So I really feel this is my sacred mission to share this knowledge, but it's so important to be there, to go to these places and fill them with conscious awareness.
You have a
So
homepage where people can find that trip. We put it on your besides your name. It's called peacecodies.com. So everybody who watches this talk is very welcome to go on that homepage and get more information about Christina and her trip. What time in February will the trip be, Christina?
it will be from the 9th of February to the 18th, 2025. And
Mhm.
it will be 10 days, and we're going to go to the pyramids, to the temples. It's going to be a very magical journey. And yes, and I hope everyone that feels the call is able to join, because it's really, really the time of the lifting of the veil. It's the time for us to reconnect to our true essence. And by being in direct contact with these places that are full of these sacred codings, it's like a memory that is dormant in our DNA is awakened and remembrance comes. So, yes, well, thank you so much, Catherine, for welcoming me. It's been delightful to talk with you and just share information with you, and also receive the magical information that you've been passing me through these last months that we've been in touch. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. And also thank you for you at home that you watched this talk. I hope that you really got some new insight in all those magical information, and also that you might want to connect and come to the trip that Christina is organizing, because she's holding her lecture as she did today there as well. There's going to be special food. There's going to be so many interesting things. So yeah, please get in touch with her if you feel the call. And so I say thank you, and maybe we will continue in a next talk. Ciao, Christina.